She didn't break a rule. She honored a veteran. When a disabled Marine walked in with his service dog, she served him with a smile and was fired in front of the whole cafe. But what her boss didn't know was who that veteran used to lead. Minutes later, the cafe door opened again, and 4 Marines walked in, not for coffee, but for her. Part 1. The Cafeteria and the Moment of Truth. Marisol Maris Reed poured a fresh cup of strong drip coffee and handed it to the man with the dog, right in front of the health inspector. She kept her voice gentle, her expression composed. Behind her, her supervisor, Mr. Toland, stood silent. His face was flat, voice colder than any winter wind. "I'm sorry, Maris, but your employment is terminated, effective now." 6 years of loyalty laid waste in one breath. She didn't cry. She simply peeled off her apron, her hand trembling, and walked out. Not because she disobeyed a rule, but because she honored a principle. She refused to force a veteran and his service dog from the cafeteria. Unbeknownst to Maris, someone recorded the entire encounter. The video made its way online just before the lunch rush peaked, and that's when the rumble began. 4 military Humvees rolled into the Cedar Grove Cafe parking lot. Out stepped a U.S. Army lieutenant colonel in his full Class A uniform, sharp as the crease in his pants. Behind him stood a dozen soldiers. In that moment, the world shifted. Maris Reed was never the kind of woman who demanded attention, but she was the one people remembered. At 37, she managed the Cedar Grove Café, tucked at the corner of Oakwood and Maine, just a 15-minute drive from Fort Cedar, a sprawling military base. Cedar Grove itself resembled something lifted from a vintage postcard. Tree-lined sidewalks curved through rows of cottages, the hardware store still boasted its original painted sign, and 3 flags flew proudly outside City Hall. But inside the cafe, things felt different. Warmer, more human. Maris ran the place like a sanctuary, not a business. People walked in after exhausting shifts or deployments and rediscovered themselves within those walls. There were no fancy lattes or foam art, just strong coffee, hot refills, and a corkboard plastered with handwritten notes. "Thank you for your service. You matter. Every scar tells a story." What made Cedar Grove unique wasn't the menu, it was Maris. She remembered birthdays, anniversaries, blackout drills, and redeployment dates. She knew which veteran liked their eggs scrambled and who had sworn off caffeine after returning from Iraq. She created space for silence, especially for those who carried wounds deeper than flesh. Every Thursday at precisely 10:00 IEM, she quietly hosted Veteran Voices. 3 chairs set at a corner table where anyone who served could share or sit in silent solidarity. It began humbly. Henry Walsh, an Army Ranger recovering from PTSD, Rosa Martinez, an Air Force medic with a laugh like chimes, and Carlos Nguyen, a Marine reservist who spoke little. Within months, veterans from Korea, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, and Iraq gathered, not drawn by the coffee, but by the woman who ran the place. Maris rarely spoke of her own story, but everyone knew the outline. Her husband, Captain Tyler Reed, had been killed in action 9 years earlier in Eastern Australia. His photo hung behind the counter, jeans, boots, and a mug, but no uniform, taken a month before his final deployment, grinning at Maris through the cafe's patio doors. He never came home. Grief became her mortar and the cafe her monument. But for Maris, this was never about recognition. It was the mission. The silent service without medals or headlines. Every time she poured a cup for a war-weary soldier, every time she offered a quiet ear, every time she welcomed a service dog under a table without question, she upheld something sacred. That Wednesday morning began like any other. The bell above the door jingled softly, the early regulars filed in, coffee brewed, lights glowed through the windows, low conversation filled the air. Maris hadn't yet brewed the second pot, but she'd set aside her favorite mugs, always saved for vets. In walked Marcus Holloway, a recent Army veteran pulling a Lab GSD mix named Atlas by his side. Mid-30s, quiet intensity, a crimson vest with bold white letters, "Service dog, do not pet." Maris smiled gently as he took his seat at the worn wooden booth by the window. "Table by the sunlight, is that okay?" she asked softly. He nodded. Atlas settled at his feet. A moment later, the front door swung open, admitting a brisk breeze, and a man wearing a charcoal blazer, pressed slacks, and an expression that could wilt daisies. He clutched a clipboard. His name tag read, "Calvin Pierce, State Health Inspector." Maris forced her greeting. "Good morning, how can I help?" He stepped in, checked labels, poked at the steam table, but halted when he saw Marcus and Atlas. He went pale. That dog can't stay. That's a direct violation of health code. No animals allowed." In went Maris's calm answer. "He's a certified service dog. Federal law protects him." The inspector squared his posture. "Not in my cafeteria," he snapped. "Unless you want this place shut down. Out. Or I'll write you up." Fear rippled through the room. Marcus stiffened. Atlas looked toward him, panting softly. The other customers shrank. Maris exhaled, held her voice. She said it so everyone heard. "I refuse to make a veteran leave, or his service dog. I'll let you write your report, but you'll know you humiliated him in front of the people he protected." She braced for the explosion, but that's when the regional manager burst in. The punch was icy calm. "Maris Reed, you violated compliance law. Pack your apron. You're fired." The spoon clattered across the floor. Marcus squeezed Atlas's leash. Maris let her gaze sweep the room, ran over Marcus, lost her sight in the faded chalkboard. "Veteran voices today, free coffee to serve." She gave a faint, trembling smile, untied her apron, folded it, and said to the young barista, "Make sure he gets a refill." She didn't turn back. She walked out the side door into sunlight. No one followed. But someone hit record on their phone, and in the ether, a quiet act of conscience was captured. Part 2. The Arrival and the Turning of Tides. 15 minutes later, the cafe lay still. A few patrons whispered. A half-drunk mug steamed on a table. The barista, young Sarah Fields, her hands shaking as she poured a refill. "I didn't know what to say, but I couldn't leave the station," she said later. "I felt like I'd be letting her down." Marcus sat quietly, Atlas curled at his feet. The rumble began, a low vibration like far-off thunder. Chairs trembled, steam rippled on coffee. Through the window, Sarah saw the telltale shapes. 4 Humvees creeping across the lot, their tires growling. They parked deliberately. Then came U.S. Army soldiers in formation. In step, resolute, standing at attention. Silence rippled outward. The cafe bell jingled as a lone figure entered. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Pierce. No relation to the inspector. Decades of service lining his clean uniform. Sarah froze. "Is Grace Maurice here?" he asked quietly. The inspector paled. The regional manager recoiled. Customers stiffened. Marcus rose, eyes alert. Atlas stood. Colonel Pierce stepped into the center of the room, stopped and saluted. No drama, no flourish, but full respect. Then, soft, he said, "I'm here on behalf of the commander's office. Is the woman who refused to throw out a veteran present?" Sarah said, "She's left." The colonel looked to Sarah, then to Marcus. A veteran never looked forced. Pierce nodded once. "She did the right thing." Turning slowly, he faced the inspector. "You didn't need to know who Mr. Holloway was. You just needed basic dignity. Shame on you." Then he fixed his gaze on Ms. Toland. "You fired her for standing up? That ends now." Miss Toland swallowed. 2 soldiers unhooked the corporate sign, folding the vinyl panel like a flag. Another replaced the chalkboard message with fresh paint. "Welcome to Maris's house, where honor is served daily." The colonel paused. "You made your choice. Now we make ours." He motioned towards Sarah's phone again. It buzzed. "Fort Cedar requests Maris report to base headquarters today." He looked to Sarah and the customers, then turned and left, flanked by his team. Silence filled the cafe. But it was not empty. It brimmed with recognition. People had seen. That morning, Maris had stood not just for Marcus Holloway, but for every person who deserved respect before reputation. Part 3. The meeting at Fort Cedar. That afternoon, Mara sat in her pickup outside her home near Cedar Grove. She wore coffee-stained jeans and an old plaid shirt. No uniform, no fanfare. She stared down at her phone, reading the message again. Report to base headquarters today. What did that mean? She didn't know. But somehow, she felt the moment had shifted. She turned the key and drove toward the base. Fort Cedar greeted her with disciplined order. Flag-lined streets, cadence calls echoing. She felt like an outsider, again. Colonel Pierce met her in the HQ lobby, now in khaki gray. He shook her hand gently but firmly and said, "Thank you for coming." He led her down a hallway lined with service portraits and citations. They stopped at a door stamped Veteran Transition and Wellness Center. Inside, folding chairs, whiteboards, therapy tools, gathering dust. He said, "This was started years ago, but kept losing funding. Veteran advocates say they need someone who gets it, who understands us. I realized that someone is you." Maris looked down. "I'm not a counselor, no degrees." He nodded. "But you created a place where veterans heal. With coffee, conversation, quiet. You did more than any program with $1 million. We need that here." She heard voices near the back. A young woman emerged with a puppy wearing training vest. "Hi. You're Maris Reed, right? I saw the video of you standing up. I haven't gone out since I got home, but I think I could come to a place you run." Her name was Tasha Rivera, a former Army medic injured in Iraq. Maris blinked. The colonel said, "We'd like you to direct this center, shape it, staff it, care for people like you did at Cedar Grove." Maris swallowed hard and whispered, "I'll do it." He nodded. "Then let's begin." Heart, May Building, Hope. That night, Maris stood in the empty center. Bare walls, scuffed floors, sunlight through high windows, but it felt sacred. She pulled out a photograph of her husband Tyler, mug in hand, outside the cafe. She taped it to the blank wall. Word spread fast. Within days, the center hummed with activity. Veterans returning, spouses seeking solidarity, even children visiting. The local newspaper ran a front-page story, "From Café to Command, How One Woman Rebuilt Trust, One Cup at a Time." Maris didn't do anything flashy, no motivational speakers or consultants, just what worked. She hung a board by the coffee pot that read, "Who needs a ride or a fixture?" Therapy dogs curled in corners. Sarah Fields returned every Friday with coffee and laughter. Marcus Holloway came with Atlas every Tuesday. Some officials balked at her lack of credentials. Auditors tested logs and water quality. One inspector confronted her. "What qualifications do you have to counsel veterans?" Maris simply said, "Consistency and kindness." They stared, but soon the program was recommended as a national pilot. All this while, Cedar Grove Café wasn't forgotten. One afternoon, Maris slipped in unannounced. Sarah greeted her. "You're famous now." She slid a warm cup across the counter. "Just here for coffee," Maris smiled. The walls now displayed photos of veterans. A sign near the register read, "Maris's Corner, no one sits alone." Later that evening, Maris spoke at a local veterans fundraiser. A modest crowd greeted her. She spoke without notes. "I didn't plan to build a program. I just refused to ask a veteran to leave." Heads nodded, applause swelled. Marcus, wearing his army dress coat, saluted. At the center, later that night, she pinned a small label. "Legacy isn't what we build for ourselves. It's what we protect in others." Part 5. National Recognition. 3 weeks later, a Department of Defense envelope arrived addressed to Maris. She and Colonel Pierce stood in her office. She opened it. "You are hereby nominated for the National Civilian Commendation for Distinguished Service to Veterans, Columbia Ceremony in Washington." She shook. "I didn't do anything special," she murmured. He smiled gently. "That's exactly why you are." She packed light, her husband's watch in her pocket, And her cafe notebook notes Marcus likes black coffee. Tasha prefers tea at 2. At the airport, Marcus stood in dress uniform with Atlas. "Base escort for you," he said. "You clean up nice." She drew in a shaky breath. In the conference ballroom, cameras rolled. When her name glowed on screen, she took a shaky breath, gripped the podium. "I'm not a general. I'm not a doctor. I managed a cafe. I served coffee. I listened. One day I got fired for letting a man sit with his service dog, and that was the moment everything changed." Respect doesn't need medals, it needs presence. Applause drowned the hall. She stepped down. Marcus nodded in the back. Later, a kind man in a gray suit approached her with an old photo. Tyler, Maris, and the man who'd received his medical discharge, right there, in the cafe. "You gave me a cup that day," he said quietly. "It was the first time I felt like me again." Maris nearly wept. He pressed the photo to her hand. "It's yours now." Part 6. Back home. Cedar Grove welcomed her back. But Maris didn't go straight to the cafe. She returned to the wellness center. Now alive, at night. She added a photo of her conference speech beside the old cafe mugshot. Under them she wrote, "Honor grows where kindness is consistent." A young veteran entered, voice thin, eyes uncertain. "This place? Is it for people like me?" Her smile warmed like sunrise. "No, it's for people like all of us." The room filled with hushed nods. Ecologue, the echo of dignity. A few months later, the Wellness Center received federal certification. Cedar Grove Cafe was booming. Maris Reed had not only defended dignity, she had set a motion for systemic change. Her story asked everyone, would you stand? Would you see? Because respect isn't earned once, it's defended every day. The end. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to adapt this heartfelt story. I hope the new names, Maris Reed, Marcus Holloway, Colonel Andrew Pierce, and others, and the Cedar Grove Cafe setting resonate with the same emotional core you intended.